The Honorable Dan Carter. Welcome again. We have a weekly 1 hour show, the Mayor's Hour, where we talk to the mayor of this city, a Canadian city, about what is going on in the world today, especially with COVID and the new society that is possibly emerging out of the COVID situation, post COVID, if you will, and also what is going on with the world economy and with Canada and how we're positioning ourselves. So, Mr. Mayor, welcome.
Good.
Again?
Yeah, thank you. It's
We
good
had
to
great-
see you.
we
You're
had
looking
great-
sharp, by the way.
Thank you. We had a great show last week. Eh?
We did. We talked about a lot of things that are on people's minds, and as we enter into the spring season, I think people in Ontario are feeling pretty optimistic, just because of the reason that the weather's been spectacular and unusual for this time of year. So I think it's being uplifting for people, that a lot of people really want to feel good about the spring that is about and getting back out again. And I think
Yeah.
everybody's excited about that.
Yeah.
So.
What is going on with Ontario in terms of our city, Oshawa?
Well, if you want, we could talk a little bit about COVID-19, and of course, everybody's still concerned about COVID-19 and where we are with it.
Mr. Mayor, before we go there, there was a huge fire which became national news in Canada.
Yes.
In Oshawa, where I think 4 people lost their lives.
Yeah.
You want to comment on how does that, as mayor, how do you react to something like that?
Well, first and foremost, my thoughts and prayers are with the family, the neighbors, the community that surrounds that particular area, and of course our community in general, in regards to the lives lost. There was 4 individuals that lost their life in this fire. This fire is now under investigation. I have to say this, that our fire department did an extraordinary job. Shaun, if you know this particular area, it's a historical area. These houses were built in the early part of the 1900s. Sam McLaughlin built these homes for people that worked.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
So there's a historical aspect in regards to these homes. They're very, very small homes. They're called row homes. And so they're about 2 stories high. In this particular circumstance, this particular one was about 3 stories high. I don't know if it was an addition that was added on many years later. But the houses are side by side and they touch. They also have a common attic, which is really problematic in a fire. Our fire department was able to contain the fire within this structure down on Olive. They were able to contain it, so they were able to save all the people on the adjacent buildings that were beside it. They got them out safe. And they were able to save 5 individuals that were in the main unit. But it absolutely is devastating, not only to our community, but I got the call early Monday morning. Of course, it happened just after 1 o'clock in the morning. And then the rest of the night, you just kind of sit there with bated breath to really kind of wait for the updates. I was at the scene on Monday and made sure that we had an opportunity to visit with, of course, the firefighters and the fire chief and the emergency workers, just to say thank you. But it was just devastating. What does that do to communities? It does 2 things. One is it gets us into a place of sorrow. As I said to you before, part of my job as the mayor is to be the chief encourager office, but also the chief consoler officer. And a big part of it was these 2 roles are inactive right now, but we're really trying to make sure that we do everything we can to help those individuals that have been displaced. I have to say that Pauline Hopley, which is with the region social service department, has helped tremendously in regards to making sure all the survivors of that particular area have accommodations. The faith community and the community has come together to be able to support these individuals. So I can't thank them enough. So what does it do to a community? It brings a community together because they rise to the challenge. And we're blessed in this community, but it happens all across Canada. We're not unique in that way. Across Canada, Canadians are very generous. They're kind. They answer the call. They do wonderful things. So I'm still in shock from what has happened, but I'm really proud of our community and how we've reacted. But please continue to send your thoughts and prayers to our community for the surviving members of this family.
Yeah, as mayor, it must be a tragic thing to deal with.
It is, and you know this, Shaun. We also had a major tragedy last year of a homicide of 4 family members that were killed in their home, and that was tragic here. That was a domestic call that took family members, and that was a horrific event that our community had to address last year. Never in the history of our community have we ever addressed something like this. But again, the community came together, surrounded the family, raised dollars, helped them get through that period of time. The Oshawa Baseball Association did a tremendous job of supporting Mrs. Trainer and her family that survived, herself and her son. And you know what? Our community once again answered the call. But man, oh man, it breaks your heart every time you think about it.
Well, I mean, how do you as a leader, and how do leaders around the world, not only mayors and premiers, but also head of state, how do you as a leader deal with, we're living in a world where tragedy seems to happen with COVID, with the economic situation, state of emergency, we're going up and down, gray zone, red zone, all these things. How does a leader handle the stress?
Well, one is I want to just say something that when you're speaking on behalf of your community and you're speaking in regards to a tragedy that has happened, always be authentic. Don't speculate and truly respect the moment. Number two is just like anybody else, I have people that are around me that I speak to, share my feelings, talk about the next steps that are necessary. Leaders are not, outside of the realm of being emotional individuals, and we need people around us. So we really depend upon our spouse, our friends, and our close allies. In my circumstance, my faith comes into play, and that plays a significant role. But you have to have people around you to help you go through it. I don't think you should ever get comfortable with dealing with tragedies. I think that as they come, I think you have to do the best that you possibly can at that particular moment to take everything into consideration. You've got to be authentic in that moment. You have to temper and make sure that you speak with authority, but only on facts, and make sure that you understand that there are others around that are being affected by this. And you just have to lead from an authentic place, Shaun. And that's how I do it. I surround myself with people, talk about it. How does it feel? I'm a grandfather. So how does it feel when people are lost in tragedy? And, how do I reflect upon that? And how do I help others come to heal through this period of time?
And people thought after a year, COVID started in March last year. This March, as we know, it's a year.
Yeah.
And even downtown Oshawa here in our city, it's been devastated impact. Now they're talking about a third wave, and they're talking about variants of the virus. Could you comment? First of all, it seems as if we're sure going into some kind of a third wave, which would shut down society again in April.
Yeah, well, here's a couple of things. One is that yesterday the number of cases in Ontario, the largest province in all of Canada when it comes to population, was 1,500. Today it's over 2,100.
Really?
It jumped about 600. Where the concern is the variants. The variants of these different strains that are starting to come in. The key component behind this is to try and get as many people as possible to be vaccinated, and make sure that we continue to not only be vaccinated, but continue to do the things like I keep on saying: wear your mask, wash your hands, stay 6 feet apart, respect people's environments, be respectful when you're in public spaces. I know that people are having a hard time because of the reason that they've been in this for 13, almost 14 months now. But the reality being is we are still facing this historical pandemic, and we've got to do everything we possibly can. I'm concerned about the variants and how it's going. The good news about it is, my understanding is, some of the scientists are saying this, the AstraZeneca vaccine is doing some good things when it comes to the variants. So that's good. There's more vaccines that are now coming online, which is good. More people are starting to get vaccinated. That's good. So we're moving in the right direction, but we have a long, long way to go. So I'm hoping that we don't end up into another lockdown. I don't know if that's the right strategy, and I continue to have discussions with the province in regards to their next steps.
Can I ask you this question? It's kind of unrelated to that. Well, maybe it's kind of related. The Global Climate Summit, the Glasgow Climate Summit, is coming up in November. Is Oshawa or yourself as mayor playing any role in that kind of thing?
We aren't, but the region is. The region plays a role because of the reason that they also have a climate plan. The city also has a climate plan, but the region is really playing a significant role in regards to not only their participation, but my understanding is they're there as students. We are all students in regards to learning what we've got to do. I just commented on how wonderful March has been, and here in Ontario, and how wonderful it is to be able to enjoy this spring weather. It's unusual weather pattern for our city to be this nice at this time of year. So that also goes directly to, you know, the climate change. Last night we had one heck of a thunderstorm and lightning storm and heavy rains. That'll also tell you that the storms are intensifying also. We're also seeing some storms in the United States that are moving up as we speak. That is a concern. So we know that the climate crisis is right in front of us. We've got to make sure that we continue to do the things that are necessary. And you and I have talked about this before. What are we doing locally? How are we preparing our creeks and our valleys and our rivers and our lakes? What are we doing in regards to our buildings? What are we doing about our automobiles? What are we doing in regards to more pavement and bringing more green in? And I think that that's a really important issue that we've got to continue. So on the city side, yes, we will be an observer of the conference, but the region will play more of a role there.
So at the Climate Summit, if we may pursue this for a little bit, we want to delve into Ontario just launched released their budget for, is it 2021 budget?
Yeah.
So we want to discuss how the Ontario budget factors in COVID and this new situation we're in and how it affects the city as well. And also the federal Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is also releasing the federal budget for Canada on sometime in April, 19th, I think. Could we comment on that? But before we do that, the Climate Summit, Glasgow Climate Summit, in my mind, Mr. Mayor, is a very, very important and possibly transformational event happening this year in November. And there are three, and our own Dr. Mark Carney, he was the governor of the Central Bank of Canada. He's kind of taking the lead on that summit. And he's talked about three things: COVID, credit, and I forgot the other one.
COVID, climate.
Climate, that's right. COVID, climate, and credit. How is every city, not only Oshawa, but how are cities, and we know governments are falling into line with this overall mandate, but how do cities fit into this whole new paradigm?
Well, so let me just first say that I was disappointed. The Conservatives had their convention about a week ago. They did. Aaron O'Toole, the leader of the Conservative Party, tried to say there's no denying the climate is changing. There is a climate change that is happening. We as a party need to understand that. I was disappointed that the caucus of the Conservative Party and its members didn't support the idea that, you know, we've got a climate crisis. So I was disappointed in that. I think that it really comes down to is that the way that the change is going to happen is individuals in every part of our country, including small cities, large cities, neighborhoods, towns, villages, hamlets, all of us are going to have to start taking this very seriously and play a role. So that, to me, all I can do is, I always say as a leader, demonstrate what you want to accomplish. So in my circumstance, I have an electric car, 100% electric car. That's what I drive.
Our mayor drives an electric car.
Yeah, so I drive an electric car and it's a Chevy Bolt. I'm just going to tell you, it's nothing fancy. It's nothing fancy, but it's a great car. It's 100% electric. I get over 400 kilometers to a charge. I've 400 kilometers to a charge. It's a great little car, and I've enjoyed it. That's one of the steps that we've taken. You know, we have to do the kind of things that change our lives. You know, we look at recycling and recovery, all those kind of things. We've got to take personal responsibility in regards to what we do. And if you're elected like I am, then what policies are we putting in locally that are going to make a difference? And again, you know, we're looking at all the low-hanging fruit. You know this too. You know, like you look at recycling and recovery. Okay, that's one. Greening buildings, investing in the buildings to be able to make sure our windows and our roofs and our air conditioners and all that. Greening of our roofs, that's another aspect of it. Greening of our public spaces and not so much pavement in regards to the runoff and what kind of materials are we doing. And by the way, it's interesting, you had challenged me, I think last week, to think about what are the kind of technologies that our university and colleges are bringing to the conversation. And just today, Dr. Will Thurber had sent a whole piece in regards to solar roads and about talking about solar roads and how you can be part of a study that would go on in your community. So we've reached out to them and said, what is this all about? How does it work? Because of the reason that we're in the automobile and transportation business, I think that's another area that we have to do it. Cycling programs, believe it or not, cycling programs are part of climate commitment and making a difference. So, putting in cycling lanes, making sure there's more green space, making sure that we have in boulevard transportation pathways. Believe it or not, that stuff does work, and it encourages people to get out of their car and move forward. But on the other side of it is, we're looking at our agricultural community. Our agricultural community plays a significant role, and I know they're making massive changes in what they're doing. So I think that all of us play a role, but it has to come down to each and every one of us as individuals. And if you're an elected official like I am, and all the mayors across Canada and premiers and representatives, I think we have to demonstrate that we are committed to climate, even if our party or the people that we support don't. We have to demonstrate it ourselves, and we have to make those commitments locally. Because the reality being is, my granddaughter's 3, and I want to make sure that she has a world to be able to embrace as much as I've had that opportunity. But if we don't do something, we're going to be in a lot of trouble.
So one of the challenge, of course, is public opinion. But
yes.
we'll get to that. Before we get to that, Ontario's budget.
Yeah.
How is it? Is it anything different from a regular budget?
Well, let's be absolutely honest. You brought up the environment. To my understanding, there wasn't a lot of talk about the environment in the budget.
Really?
And so but there is a lot of help for business. There's a lot of help in healthcare. There's some investments that are going in there. This is still a COVID budget. We're going to be, once again, I think over the next year, we're going to still be dealing with the COVID impact, both on business, on healthcare, on frontline workers, on municipalities. We as a municipality are looking at, our revenues are down, of course, by about 80%, of course, because because none of our facilities are open. So we're not receiving any revenues at all. So we have to look at cost containment. So the Ontario budget is really trying to find that balance in regards to how do we get the economy back and going so that we can get people back to work, spending dollars, bringing tax dollars in, all those kind of things. But I don't think this is a budget that is looking to the future as much as it is just looking at what we're facing at this particular time. Remember, this is just my opinion. I would love to see, and I was just on a call for the last hour, matter of fact, with a panelist of people that come from all different sectors of our community. And we were talking about the role of media and journalism and where it fits and what's really important.
My favorite topic.
Well, it's because I'm a great believer that you have to have good conversations and you have to have challenging questions to hold public officials like myself accountable. I think that that's fair, and we have to answer those questions even if they are uncomfortable or even if you disagree with the answer. But we have to be able to answer those questions. But getting back to the issue was, right now we're looking at what's happened because of COVID, and we're all still dealing with COVID. The province of Ontario is doing the same thing. Long-term care, hospital care. They're looking at supporting small business, and those kind of things are going to continue to be a big part of.
Is there anything in the budget for this city, for Oshawa?
Well, there's money for small business that goes directly in regards to supporting small business in cities, so that's a good thing. I haven't seen.
Good news for us here.
Well, it is, because there's another grant that is out there from $10,000 to $20,000 to be able to fill the gap. So that's good news. I think that really helps. How we get the economy back on track again. Now we're very fortunate. Some of the speculation. And some of the estimates about where Ontario's economy is going, where our local Oshawa Durham region economy is going, are some really good things. So we've got to just build on that. But we're still in COVID, and we have to understand that. Now, the interesting part being is, where are we going to be when it comes to the federal budget, and what's that going to look like? And that's going to be quite significant because, Shaun, here's some really interesting facts. The Liberal government is going to have some really interesting policies coming forward. There is discussion within their party about a national farmer care program. There's also a discussion about a guaranteed income in the country. So those are some really interesting investments that they're looking at. They're also looking at investments, of course, in other areas such as healthcare and COVID. But there's some really interesting policies that may be part of the next budget. And I'm excited to be able to see where that goes, because that may push other provinces to kind of look at what about those programs the federal government has, and what do we have to do as a provincial government, and then of course local government plays a role in that.
So one of the big, and we discussed this last week, but I think every week maybe we need to kind of touch on this topic. A lot is going on in the world, and a lot of changes are happening. A lot of systematic, foundational changes are happening below the surface. So people don't see this. We had today, I don't know, maybe if you pass around Memorial Park in the city, people are protesting. All over the world, people are protesting. People are coming out, they're protesting against masks, against lockdowns, against economic downturns. They're protesting against COVID, right?
Yeah.
How do we work on the public perception, on public opinion, not necessarily to convince them that COVID is a real thing or not a conspiracy? That we don't, I guess, get into, but how do we engage the public in a conversation?
So let me put the question back to you.
Yes.
Is I think, and I don't know if you believe the same thing, but a democracy, when it's challenging and when it's calling for accountability, do you believe that's a good thing?
Absolutely.
I do too. So believe it or not, out of the protests that are happening and the discussions that are going on, people that are coming out and protesting, they deeply believe these things, but they're having a public conversation about it. My fear is, where are people getting the information?
Right.
And is the information correct? And that's what kind of concerns me about where we are. You and I both witnessed south of the border what happened over the last 4 years. There was a lot of their news, not the news, their news, and with their interpretation of what their news was, not the news. And that really kind of steams what happens. I think, and this is Jim Flaherty, our former finance minister of Canada, and also our local representative, both at the provincial level and at the federal level, used to always say, he said, Dan, protests, and when people protest, that's good for democracy, because it shows that people are passionate, they're committed, and they want accountability, and they want to have a conversation. So I don't think protest is a bad thing. What I do think is that we need to take those opportunities then to have conversations about not only telling, and this is where it goes wrong. We sit there and try and go, well, this is the way it is. I think what we have to do is sit back and say, why do you believe that? What are your concerns? And really listen to those conversations. Because if you don't listen to those conversations, the issue being is then all they feel is they're not getting anywhere in regards to their concerns. I think we have to have national conversations and debates. We've got to talk about the hard things. We've got to talk about removing the myths. I mean, one of the things that you do in your profession is you're challenging people to have a conversation. And you know that out of conversation, ideas and concepts come up, but education and information happens at the same time. So protest around the world. And if you look at it in Italy, they're professional protesters. I mean, these guys do it just spectacular. I was in Italy in Rome in 2006, and I still remember there was a massive protest. I have no idea what it was, but there was like 30 to 40,000 people out on the streets protesting.
Wow.
And when you see passionate people that are committed to something so strong, I think it's really good. Where the issue is today is where are people getting their information?
Right.
Is it the correct information? And is that the wick that is pushing people? And if it is the wick, how do we make sure that we're getting the right information out the door?
Right. So one of the problems that we face is misinformation.
Sure.
Where people, whatever the source they get their information from, it could be even some mainstream media. A lot of it, like for example, the Toronto Sun and the National Post, they have a different viewpoint of how things work as against, say, Global Mail,
right,
or TVO or one of those.
Right.
So the thing is, I think a lot of what we're facing is the public. A lot of people are protesting. I agree, protesting is good for democracy and everything. Isn't a lot of these protests based on misinformation? And here is where I think your leadership as mayor of a city, and we can comment on the leadership provincially and federally in Canada, and by extension globally. Are leaders doing enough to let people know, the masses, the public, the ordinary folks out there, know that there's not some big conspiracy to disrupt everybody's life and control people and build a surveillance society and push people in their house? All that might be going on, I don't know. But is there some shortcoming where we're not saying to people, look, there are systematic changes that need to happen. We need to move the world into a more sustainable situation. And there are things that were not working that need to be working. Like, for example, if people falling through the cracks and all that. Are we missing that information link?
Absolutely, and I think what is also happening at the same time, Shaun, is these are real events that are happening to real people in real time.
Right.
And when you look at, if people don't have enough to eat, if they don't have enough money to be able to pay the bills, if they're in precarious work, if they are worried about their children and their future, I think all of these things come into that equation. Mm-hmm. And I think you have to understand their fears, apprehensions, and their interpretations of what's going on. This is where the media, the news instead of their news, right, has to play a role. We have to, we really do have to have serious conversations about what is truly going on without the bias of either conservative or socialist, course, yeah, or liberal aspects. We have to just report the news. We have to have the conversation. The problem being is a lot of people have lost faith in individuals that are elected. Mm-hmm. And they've seen things that are going on around the world. A big part of the conversation for your audiences joining you from all across probably the world is in Toronto. Google tried to set up a community there. And a lot of it was about this new digital community. And they were going to collect a lot of information, and yes, they were looking at face recognition, and they were looking at patterns and buying patterns and all this. And the city of Toronto and the residents went, no, you've crossed a line. Mm. But that's where some of the fear happens is, when you look at the algorithms that are on all the social media, they follow you all the way through. Yes. If you're looking at, hey, I want to buy a new mask with a logo on it, and you type it into one of the search engines, the next thing you know, every news article that you go to and everything else has this on it. So that's the world. So we've created our own monster, haven't we? We've created this wonderful thing of technology. You and I grew up, or maybe I should speak. I grew up in an era, sorry, I don't like to age out, but I grew up in an age where if you wanted to learn something, you had to get an encyclopedia that was that thick, weighed 68 pounds, and a guy came to your door and sold you one a month, kind of thing. And so that's how you learned it. Now we have more information than the world has ever seen before at your fingertips that can get to you in seconds. Mm-hmm. And so, understand what people's fears, apprehensions, and what they're
So what are leaders doing about addressing those fears and apprehensions?
I guess we're not doing enough.
We're not. I think, look, in our show, I know our show, the show that was on social media for the past week, it's been there for 7 days.
Yes.
Our previous show.
Yeah.
And if you look at some of the comments, a lot of the comments across different platforms, including Facebook and YouTube and everywhere. Yeah. A lot of the comments were kind of, we don't need a third wave. We need to avoid any shutdown of society. And so part of the Glasgow Climate Summit, Mr. Mayor, is that public opinion should be addressed in terms of educating people, and maybe educating is the wrong word, but making people more aware of and more conscious and more awoke of climate and what is going on with the climate, of credit, and of COVID. And that framework is there within the Glasgow Summit, Climate Summit, for people to be educated, for people to be made aware of what is going on. But it's not happening.
Right, but think about this, Shaun. Some world leaders around the world are saying COVID is nothing. It's
our Conservative Party was doing that.
Right. I mean, it's people are saying that COVID is. You look at Brazil, the president of Brazil, right? Yeah. What did he do? Oh, it's no big deal. Everything else, You even had the president of the United States last year say that it was no big deal and everything else. I mean, these are world leaders, and if they're saying it, the public goes, well, they're world leaders. They must be telling the truth. And then you have other world leaders saying, no, this is real. You have Dr. Fauci and all these experts from around the world saying, we've never seen a pandemic like this before.
Yeah.
This is real. This is what it is. So, you brought up a little bit earlier on in regards to the different types of media. The Monk series of lectures is a wonderful opportunity to actually learn. There is no, I had to do a debate one time. So I do political debates where it's rough and tumble, right?
Right.
Kind of thing. Then I went and did a debate with all of these academics. And academics don't debate based upon emotion. There's no emotion. It's just facts. They say, this is the facts. And I go, well, I think your fact's wrong. You go, that's fine that you think my fact's wrong, but I'm telling you these are my facts. And then you would tell your facts. So when you look at like the Monk series of lectures, when you look at TVO or PBS, when you look at the Globe and Mail, where they really sit down and they start talking about serious things in a clear and concise way with no bias, it changes. I felt that way for a long time about the New York Times. But the Times has now, you can see a bias that's come into one of the best papers that I thought were out there. So you're seeing even these large publishers start to sway on the political the spindle, and that's not a good thing. So world leaders, when they are saying opposite to what the science is saying, and science both in COVID and science when it comes to climate. I mean, you and I are both people of faith, but the science is saying this is serious stuff, folks, and we better take it seriously. So we need to have this adult conversation about adult things that are going to be uncomfortable, that all of us are going to be really uncomfortable being told that we've got to take all these steps. By the way, is to fix climate, is it going to affect us in regards to our economics? Absolutely, it's going to. I mean,
and that's a tough conversation.
Oh, sure it is. Because everybody wants to prosper. Nobody wants to be hit hard. But the reality being is, we prospered from this climate that we've created. We should also understand that we're going to have to pay for the prosperity that we got from this climate.
And that is the kind of public message, Mayor Carter, that we need to somehow, especially in our city, this is my concern, and in Oshawa, in Ontario, in Canada, we need to have this kind of public campaign of communicating to the masses, to the ordinary people out there. And they would come on board, and people would cooperate, and people would help, because we need to let people know that society is being made more humane. And yes, not everything is perfect. We're human beings. Human nature is fallen and imperfect as it is. But I think too many people are freaking out about COVID and how the society is going and the economic impact of it.
But could we learn what they faced with the 1917, 1918, 1919?
Precisely,
we can do that. Shaun, another thing is, why don't we have public debates like this in public squares where we can actually have a debate where I'm not here to prove you wrong and you're not here to prove me wrong. We're sitting here saying, here's a subject matter. What's your opinion? What are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? Who's responsible? How could we fix it? Not sit there and go, you're wrong, and therefore, you're 100% responsible for it. The reality being is we need to have a conversation about, we understand we've got big problems. How are we going to address them? How are we going to help people? The reality being is, right at this particular time, we understand that we are in a historical moment that most of us have never faced before.
That's right, yeah.
My parents were born in the early part of the 1900s. They faced that period of time. Not only that period of time, but the Depression. And one of the things that stuck with my parents, when they went through, and both of them served in the Second World War, by the way.
Wow.
They never, ever, ever forgot about their experiences through 1918. They never forgot about 1929, and they never forgot about from 1940 to 1945. And as children of those parents, they shared that with me. And I've never forgotten about the stories and the hardship and hearing them say, my dad would say, so Monday was my sister's turn to eat and Wednesday was my turn to eat. But that's the way it was. That's what it was. The Depression, nobody had anything. And that to me is one of the things that we have to take into consideration. It's like we have examples, excuse me, we have examples of the past that we can learn from. And my parents, through those experiences, then translated that to their sons and daughters. And for me, I carry that as a reminder of that we are now in a pandemic. What did I learn from my parents, and what can we learn from this experience? And then it's my responsibility to make sure my children and my grandchildren understand this period of time.
Well, as mayor also the city, for example, TVO, this national TV station in Canada, ran an interview that Steve Piken did with Dr. Mark Carney.
Yeah.
Who did a lecture, a 4-part lecture, BBC, so BBC lecture in England, that I had the privilege of listening to this 4-part lecture, and therefore I became more aware of what is going on with COVID and the whole situation of why the world is in the state it is. And I became aware of certain things. For example, in Oshawa, here in our city, back in 100 years ago, when the industrial age was now starting up, we had huge changes. The roads were not as highways as they are now, as highways are now. The roads were, dirt roads. The horses were traveling on with carriages carrying people. This was just 100 years ago. And how did society transition from that into cars and paved roads and everything mechanized and motor vehicles everywhere? We're in such a situation right now. And Mr. Mayor, I would like to see what TVO did with Dr. Mark Carney, interviewing him and talking to him about the whole new society that is emerging and stuff. We need to do that locally in our city.
And we're very lucky because we've got Ontario Tech University, Durham College. Durham College has one of the best journalism programs and television and radio programs. We have lecturers and experts from around the world that are profs at our universities and colleges. We've got 2 universities and a college. I mean, we got the opportunity right here to be able to have those conversations. And all we can do is create a platform where those conversations can be undertaken. But then what do you do with those conversations about then what is each and every one of us not only going to learn, but what are we going to commit to? And if it's climate, or if it's the economy, or if it's poverty, or if it's opiates, or if it's elder care, what are we willing to do about it, and how are we going to be able to make the change that is necessary? I mean, you talk about 100 years ago and how things have changed dramatically. I just finished a book about Homo sapiens, and it talks about the evolution of a human being. And it's a really interesting read that you kind of learn about humanity based upon the author's interpretation. And he's a professor, and so you learn about that, but you see the evolution of how we used to do things. It's the same thing in our community, right? In society. Now, the good news is sooner or later Homo sapiens figure it out. And we end up doing the right thing, but sometimes it takes us way too long to get there. The bad news about it is that it takes us a long time to get there and have those conversations about the change that is necessary. So, if there's ever a time that the storm is perfect, we've got COVID, we've got the climate, we've got an economy that's badly beaten. You've got people that feel that they don't feel a part of in society, that they don't feel like their government hears them. Mm-hmm. If there's ever a time to be able to bring these conversations together, isn't this the moment to be able to do it? Mark Carney is a great example of a guy that was our finance, the head of the Bank of Canada. Mm-hmm. Then he was the checker in the UK. Mm-hmm. He's well respected. But Shaun, you know this. How long was Al Gore speaking about the climate, and everybody went, don't know, so icebergs fall apart, what's the big deal? It's going to go up by 1.5 degrees around the world. Ooh, kind of thing. But what you don't realize is it's the effects of it. It's the effects of all of those people that will be displaced. The water by raising, 1.5 degrees in a difference in temperature,
Yes.
what does that do to the ice cap? What does it do in regards to the water levels around the world? What does it do in regards to the storms? What does it do in regards to displacing individuals? So we always look at it and say, well, this is great in Ontario. You know, we're going to be warmer today than we should be. But how does that affect around the world? And when is that going to end up coming to roost? You and I have even seen Miami. There's parts of Miami that water is coming onto their streets and into their buildings. Why? Because of the reason that sea levels are rising. This is a big concern. So, folks, you think that it's not coming? It is here.
The thing is, the average person, like myself, would say, this is academic stuff. It's too big for me. I can't deal with it. I just want to run my business and make some money and take care of the family and do all those little things that a person does. Like a lot of the people who are protesting are simply saying, I want my business to open. I want to be able to make money. I want to be able to pay my bills without seeing the big picture.
Right.
How do we get the individual person, the individual business, the small business on the corner to see the big picture and to say, you know what, we need to take this seriously. It concerns us personally.
But you know what? I think that a lot of, and I'm just speaking on my opinion, based upon what I've seen. The smaller businesses and these businesses, yes, you're absolutely right. They want to keep their doors open. They want to feed their family. They want to make sure that they're able to have an opportunity to provide for the next generation. I get that, but they're also very socially conscious in regards to their community and the impact that they have on their community. Where my concern is, and what's getting better, is the larger and larger corporations, worldwide corporations, are now starting to see that there's a seriousness in regards to the moment. Yes. And I think that that's a good thing. We're still not there yet. I worry about our petrol companies around the world. If you look into Louisiana, and there's some great books that are out there in regards to Louisiana and how Louisiana is almost like this chemical dumping zone. You know, they've got these wonderful trees that are in Louisiana and some of the bayous that are they estimate, you know, they're 500, 700-year-old trees that are just dying because of the amount of chemicals that are being poured into their water systems there. And you know, here's the prime example. I read about it and I went, why aren't people upset? So they gave examples of how these chemical companies and oil companies were pouring into the water system. Even the people that lived in the area, some of them were dying because of the exposure of these chemicals. And then on the other side of it, they talked to other family members, said, yes, we lost, you know, Uncle Joe and Aunt Mary and all these kind of things, but I work at that petrol company and I make $26 an hour. And you see the separation is, it's too bad it happened to them, but I've got a good job. I'm able to provide for my family. And, you know, that's where that disconnect is. So the larger corporations around the world that we absolutely have to continue to push them as hard as we possibly can. Smaller businesses, community businesses, in my opinion, they do take these things seriously. You know why? Because they live next door to you. They are a family business. They hired local people. They really do try and make sure that they, and by the way, if you ever have a complaint at a family business, you don't have to phone a hotline. You can talk to the owner right there, and your concerns are heard. So I think that, you know, the reality being is there is large change. You talked about how we went from horse and buggy to where we are today, the evolution of transportation, right? So we've done this evolution in transportation. So it's also the evolution of poisons that we've put into the water and into the air. The evolution aspect is we are now starting to see the evolution of the electric vehicle. We're seeing that there is other ways of being able to, Bill Gates has been able to show how he works with companies that are taking cement, capturing carbon and encasing it into cement, and therefore taking carbon out. It's not the full answer, but it's part of the answer. And he's looking at ideas and solutions in regards to how does that help not only business be able to succeed because they've got something to sell, but also on the other side is what does it do in regards to our economy?
But you mentioning Bill Gates would work a lot of people.
But he's an interesting guy. He's an interesting guy. And I mean, you can agree, disagree, but you know, here he is. He's worth $180 billion. Him and Melinda have given billions of dollars away. They have different organizations through the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that don't only just do humanitarian work, but they're working with some of the brightest minds in the world. At least he's saying, I got $180 billion. I'm going to use this money in the best possible way to be able to give it to people that are a lot smarter than he is. And he's a really smart guy.
Oh, yeah.
And into research. And by the way, a lot of those young people that are working on forward-thinking research are bringing brilliant ideas to the table that you kind of just sit there and go, wow, like, how do you think this stuff up?
And this is the thing, Mr. Mayor, we're on the cusp of literally a brand new world of advancement, of new technology, of amazing solutions that young people are bringing. Look at the Swedish girl, Greta Thunberg.
Yep.
The amazing work she's doing, but she has a lot of enemies. A lot of people say, how dare you go to school and don't say these things.
But great leaders stand in difficult positions at difficult times because of the passion that they believe. Martin Luther King stood in a place where he truly believed that the Civil Rights Act needed to be enacted because of the reason of the mistreatment and the rights that were taken away, even though the Constitution said that it would protect them. Greta's doing the same thing. She is a young girl that truly believes in her heart and soul that she is being called to this. Malala, that is from Afghanistan, the same kind of thing, believes deeply in the things that she believes in, and as a matter of fact, put her life on the line to be able to do it. Absolutely. We have a lot of these individuals, and it's easy to criticize individuals that are trying, right? It's easy to sit back and go, they're just kids, or they don't know what they're talking about. But it's also easy to sit back and just listen and to hear their point of view and maybe learn something out of those conversations, and then do your own research, and you're asking your own questions in your community about how does that relate to our community? What can we do in regards to making differences? If it's inequity, if it's poverty, if it's drug abuse, if it's homelessness, if it's the climate, if it's the COVID, if it's the economy, whatever it is, you have an opportunity to be able to learn from others.
And these things are no longer local. All of this stuff that you just mentioned, it all applies to every society, whether poor countries, rich countries, it applies across the board to everybody. And these kinds of conversations these tough conversations. I think this is why we do the show, right? We want to, in our city at least, have this kind of public communication happening instead of people freaking out and thinking, I don't know what's going on. Let's let people know what's going on. For example, there was a column in the UK Guardian sometime this week by this writer Jones, who's a big time columnist. And so very influential guy, and he wrote about, again, Mark Carney's idea, that the future is no longer about how much profit you can make in your business, or even as a household. It's about how are you positioning your company, your lifestyle, your home, your family, to contribute to a clean climate. And this kind of conversation, when people raise the whole question of economy, the economy shutting down, we won't make profit, we won't make money. It's not only about paying bills, it's about us, because the government is giving a lot of, stimulus help and all those things. But it's about profit, right? We're changing the conversation away from profit, from economics,
and that's a hard.
It is a hard,
because profit drives investment. Profit drives our RSPs. Profit, what I'm saying is, so everybody is touched one way or another in regards to it. But again, you just have to understand that we have profited from our economy based upon our actions. We're going to have to profit from our economy in regards to the actions we're going to have to take to make sure that we have an economy. Because if we don't, humanity is going to have a difficult time being able to move forward. And I think.
So how do we reconcile this idea of having an economy where we're making profit and money's flowing and bills are being paid and we're making things and we're going to the mall and we're buying shiny new TVs and fancy cars? How do we reconcile that world, which has been going on for the past 100 years, basically, and evolving and progressing more and more? How do we reconcile that with the fact that the climate is falling apart, basically? Whether we believe it or not, let's take what the scientists are saying, just factual based on what the scientists are saying. Put our feelings aside. The scientists are saying the climate is falling apart. There's this huge opening that happened in the Antarctica, where the iceberg split in two, basically. How do we reconcile those two words?
Well, I think that the reality being is if economics is the motivating factor, then speak to the language that people understand. So when you look at a green economy, there is economic studies out there that can actually show that the economy can really be prosperous when we invest into the right fields and when it comes to especially climate. There's economic studies out there that show that it's good business not only in regards to corporate image, but it also is good business in regards to cutting costs, cutting the impact on society, and is profitable in regards to selling your goods and your wares. So we can make the economic argument that, believe it or not, being concerned about the economy and the climate at the same time has the opportunity to be able to meet the needs that you're concerned about. How do I pay the bills? How am I going to look after my family? How am I going to send my kids to school? So, again, it's about us putting that argument forward. If that's the Achilles heel for people, that every decision we make and everything has to be judged based upon what do I get out of this? And if it's based upon the mighty dollar, then why don't we build the argument around the economics that go with a better climate in our community? Because we've tried to look at it as the human base, right? We've had to have these conversations. What about my grandkids? And what about my kids? And people go, yeah, but they'll be fine. We always figure it out, right? We've tried that. But we know the motivating factor for everybody, and you've highlighted it. How do you get people engaged because of the reason that they're just trying to make ends meet? And what we need to do is start making the argument that this makes good sense. I'll give you an example. In local government, we're looking at ways of being able to be more accountable, cut costs, and also create communities that are prosperous for those that move into our communities. So you have to, and you've heard me say this, we have to demonstrate it. As a local government, we have to demonstrate it. So when we make a commitment in regards to cutting costs, how do we cut costs? We cut costs in regards to, what about the windows that we have in our buildings? What do we do in regards to how our buildings are being built? What kind of materials are we using? What changes are we using in historical buildings that we own that could be more efficient when it comes to the environment itself? What kind of vehicles do we provide to be able to use our staff to use? What are we doing in regards to that? How are we doing things more efficient so that we don't have 5 cars going with 5 individuals, 1 individual in each car to the same site? How do we make sure we take these things into consideration? So we've got scorecards, and we're looking at every element. How are we cutting our gas consumption? How are we cutting our electricity consumption? How are we making sure our air conditioners aren't pumping out so much more air conditioning because the windows that we have in our buildings are inefficient, so it's all escaping into the air? I mean, we have to demonstrate it as local government that this matters. And by the way, it matters because of the reason that not only is this good government and not only is it responsible in regards to our public, but it's also the right thing to be able to do. And by the way, it's good for the economy.
So how do we get that message across in our city? How do we take leadership and kind of position Oshawa as a major city in Ontario to lead in this new way of seeing society, seeing human beings?
One person at a time, one conversation at a time, working with our colleges and our universities, planting these stories within our social media channel and just talking to our people that are our journalists on a daily basis. Just let them know what we're doing. And continue to make sure that is front and center. Continue to be able to say that. And, where you have the opportunity, inform yourself, educate yourself, inform yourself, watch things. Again, we talk about it. We can see some of the best, smartest people in the world at our fingertip. We can watch the best lectures, the smartest people around the world, educate ourselves, inform ourselves, be better prepared to answer the question. And by the way, our kids and our grandkids are going to come home and say, what did you do? Or what are you doing? So you better, one way or another, we don't get a pass on this.
At the end of the day, we're answerable to Greta, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's...
To my son, to your grandchild, we're answerable to the young people.
Yeah.
And this is where it's hard. And we're ending on this note for this week. Join us again next week. for the Mayor's Hour, Mayor Dan Carter of Oshawa, discussing these issues because we need to reposition ourselves in our own minds, but also society, on what is going on with society and how do we move forward. What is post-COVID going to be like? Uh, there is so much. There is so much to talk about, and hopefully, Mr. Mayor, every week we're going to add to the conversation, brick by brick, layer by layer. We start impacting public opinion because at the end of the day, even a lot of leaders don't realize what's going on. A lot of leaders in a major country like Canada, in a major part of Canada like Ontario, a lot of the political leaders, I'm saying the MPs and even maybe some of the mayors, they haven't listened to Mark Carney's BBC lectures, those four-part lectures. They are not preparing for a major global event like the Glasgow Climate Summit that would impact their city or their province or the country. So we want to, Mayor Dan Carter and myself, we want to add some kind of catalyst to this kind of conversation. So we generate some kind of movement, however small it may be.
You know, one of the guys that we have right here in Oshawa that works up at Ontario Tech University, his name is Dan Hornweg. Okay. Dan Hornweg used to be with the World Bank, and he is an environmental specialist. And if you ever get the chance to be able to sit and chat with him, he's just a really fascinating guy. He worked in some of the most impoverished parts of the world dealing with waste and water, to be able to figure out ways of being able to not only educate but bring fundamental historical change to communities where they dealt with waste and water, because waste and water also go to the spread of disease, it goes to economics, it goes to every aspect of, and it, by the way, it lingers from generation to generation. He's one of the most fascinating guys, Shaun. And if you get the chance, he is a really, and I know that the two of you would have an incredible conversation. The World Bank plays an important part around the world, and it's delivering some great service. We're lucky we've got Dan Hornweg right here at Ontario Tech University.
Well, we're lucky we have a mayor like Dan Carter, willing to sit and have this conversation, very humble, very engaging, and we look forward to having you next week. The thing is, we want you to be involved in our conversation as well, so send us messages, you can message us on social media, on our Facebook page. The show is available, it's always there, and our YouTube channel and across social media. Communicate with us, communicate with the mayor and ask your questions, and he's an open guy, and we can have a brilliant conversation because we're in fascinating times. This is what I'm excited about. You're mayor of a city in a very, very fascinating time of human history. And I believe we all need to come together and not see shadows hiding in the back room, but we need to see that, and wherever leadership is short, there is shortcoming in leadership, or there is some failure, trust me, everybody's confused right now, and they would listen to us. In my experience, leaders would listen to us. If we go out there and say we're on board, we're making the world a more humane society, a more humane global village, and we all want to be in this together, not, divisions rising up, keeping us apart. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate it. This is the Mayor's Hour. Let's have a good week, a good weekend, actually, and looking forward to see you again next week.
Take care. Great to see you.